Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com here with the top 5 builds you should be using in Thrones and Liberty. This is going to be a brief overview of the build, pros and cons, and a little bit about the specifics like best skills, best passives, and kind of how it plays and why you should play it. So regardless of the type of player you are, if you started this game and looking for a weapon combination that works, this is the video for you. Written guides below in the description, as well as timestamps if you wish to skip ahead, but don't be a filthy skipper. Let's get started. So the first build up I want to talk about is the staff and the wand. So the staff and the wand combination is really useful because of its damage, durability, and range. It's like the best overall for solo players. The staff will give you tons of damage, needing to clear out content quickly, while the wand and tome helps heal, keep you alive, and also has some crowd control. So when you combine these two, even if you're unfamiliar with the game, you can hang back at range, heal yourself, heal other people if you do dungeons, and blast critters from far away. Staff is that go-to weapon to power through content on your main hand or offhand, especially when you're leveling and starting off. So some of the best skills to use are serial fire bombs and inferno wave from the staff, and then swift healing and blessed barrier from the wand and tome. Some of the best passives are mana ball eruption, devotion and emptiness, vampiric contract, and mana amp. So as you're leveling up, you have a couple of different abilities to deal with critters. Cursed nightmare, this is your CC, comes from wand and tome. It's extremely useful because it puts something to sleep. This is kind of like a mez or something else in other games, so you can't damage it. So you want to put it on the high DPS target that's attacking you and let it just sit there sleep. Icebound tomb from the staff also does something very similar, and frost smokescreen acts as a way to push you back and kind of weaken and or trigger that frost debuff. Now what the staff wants to do is apply status effects and then use the status effect to trigger extra damage. So for instance, serial fire bombs, this is your main way to apply burning status effect. And then once you have the burning status effect applied, you can apply it more than once actually, then you can use Inferno Wave to do extra damage based on the amount of stacks that you have. You can also use heavy attacks on the victim of this Inferno Wave to inflict 2 stacks of burning. So your primary combo is just simply using serial fire bombs and Inferno Wave. Very, very simple. Now as you progress with the staff, then you're going to be using what's called Ice Spear. So this is a 1.5 meter Ice Spear, does some big base damage, but it weakens and applies frost. It also does a snare, so it's nice if some critter's chasing you, you want to hit it and kind of kite around. You'll apply that, and then you're going to be using Chain Lightning. So Chain Lightning is going to do a ton of damage, but if the enemy is inflicted with frost, it's going to transfer damage to nearby targets up to 5 meter radius, to 3 of them. So you're applying these debuffs, frost and burn, and then another skill after it's applied. You want to get as many stacks of this as possible as you can, and then nuke them with big AoE. That's how the staff essentially works. Now, how the wand and tome works is by applying the curse. You have a couple of different ways to apply curse. A simple, easy one is Touch of Despair early on and Corrupted Magic Circle. So Touch of Despair is very low cost, very low cooldown, and it's your primary way to apply it to one critter. Corrupted Magic Circle is a little bit more mana cost, but it applies it AoE. And then once you have those cursed applied, you use Cursed Explosion to consume it and do, well, more damage. You guessed it. So both of the mechanics follow the same type of path. Applying debuffs, and then once the debuffs are applied and getting as many stacks as possible, then consuming those debuffs or using them to cause more and more damage. So for survivability, swift healing, this is your base skill that heals you as well, and it can be used up to 2 times in a row. It's going to cost a lot of mana, so you don't want to spam this repeatedly, but it's a useful thing if you're topped off on mana and you need to cast something to keep yourself alive. Clay Salvation also works as well. It's more of an AoE heal, and so when I was starting out and really struggling, I would use Swift Healing and Clays back to back when I was really taking a lot of pressure. So if you need a bit of extra healing or you're going to do a dungeon, think about swapping Clays in for a little bit extra healing, not just on yourself, but your group. And then you want to round out your build with skills like Inner Peace. This is going to help with mana regen, especially if you're wet, and also high focus, and it's going to increase your cooldown speeds. And then you're just going to go out, apply some debuffs, AoE damage, nuke things, heal yourself, and that's why the build works. Make sure you get Vampiric Contract because it's going to restore allies' health of the damage dealt by curse victims, but if there's no allies around, it's going to restore your health. So it's going to passively keep you topped off healing. Rotation again, Touch of Despair to apply a curse, Serial Firebombs to apply burning, and then consuming the Serial Firebomb, burning with Inferno Wave, consuming the curse with Cursed Explosion. Very, very simple. Moving on to number 4, and that's Sword and Shield and Wand and Tome. Well, or Sword and Wand. So this build is going to be like the best tank. If you just love surviving and never dying, this is going to be for you. It's not going to be the best, clearly, while you're leveling, because you're not going to do nearly the amount of damage, but you're going to be very tanky. Pretty early on, you can do dungeons, and it's very helpful to have a super high survivability tank. Just realize it'll be a lot slower of the leveling process, but you will be using this at endgame, especially in PvE and or PvP. So Sword and Shield is the one weapon that is the epitome of survivability, and what it does is it applies a taunt, or in this game, provoke. So provoking roar is your taunt mechanic. Then your skills specifically build aggression. So that's aggro. In other games, how it works is you get a tank to taunt something and it attacks that individual tank. You are supposed to be continuing to use skills that make the mob or enemy aggressive towards you, and that's the mechanic here. If another DPS or healer is pulling a lot of aggro, it's because they're using a lot of abilities. They're out basically DPSing your aggression mechanic. So there's a lot of skill based in the Sword and Shield build in this specific game because the cooldowns are a lot more frequent, and you're going to have to rotate and make sure that they're aggressive and or aggroed to you. Why you use a wand with this build is you have good CC with it, a little bit of range, and also healing. So you have the role of, hey, I can heal, hey, I can tank, and I'm just not going to die. The issue you're going to face with this build, in my experience, is running out of mana. You have to be really cognizant of what skills cost a lot of mana and what do not. Because rotating and burning through a bunch of swift healing and other skills, you're not going to be able to maintain aggression when you need it by casting those critical Sword and Shield abilities. So best skills you're going to use with this: Counter Barrier, Provoking Roar from Sword and Shield, Blessed Barrier and Swift Healing from Wand and Tome. Some useful defensives: Shield, Survival Technique, Aegis Shield, Saint's Oath, and Vampiric Contract. So the main bread and butter of the skills is Provoking Roar. So it's going to have a 70% chance to provoke or aggro 6 enemies within 3 meter radius for 4 seconds. So it's going to force them to attack. That radius is pretty small, so you need to be up close and personal to that main boss before you trigger this. Once you trigger this, you'll notice that it only affects those enemies for a brief time, 4 seconds. So then you need to go through a rotation of maintaining aggro or aggression. The two primary ways to maintain aggression is Shield Strike. So this is going to strike an enemy. It's your low cooldown, low cost, low distance way to continue to trigger that aggression towards you. And then Shield Throw. This is going to be a longer cooldown, a longer mana, but it's also going to be 10 meters. So maybe you're not able to close the distance fast enough, you don't have a gap closer up, and you just need to maintain aggro because you lost the boss for a second. This is Shield Throw. So those are your two main ways to bring that boss or the enemy back to you. This is the mechanics you're going to be using: Provoking Roar, Shield Strike, and then Shield Throw. The next most important mechanic to understand is Counter Barrier. So this is going to increase your shield block chance by 34% for 6 seconds. When you evade, shield block, or block with a defensive skill, you're going to activate a counter attack. So this is your skill that you're going to constantly revolve around defensively before you charge in. Also, Counter Barrier synergizes really well with Shield Strike. So Shield Strike on a counter attack will reduce the cooldown. You're trying to use that counterattack not only to do damage, but to evade passively and also lower the cooldown on Shield Strike. So those skills kind of work together. Now you'll have Stalwart Bastion, which is a huge damage reduction skill. Very, very helpful. And you have some mobility mechanics. While you're leveling, you may want to put on some damage and or a Greatsword on the back bar because your damage will be low. We've already talked about the wand, but the wand's main combo is applying curses with Touch of Despair and then using Cursed Explosion to do AoE damage. Sword and Shield does have a decent couple single target skills, so you can use the Sword and Shield for single target and then use the Wand and Tome for healing and AoE damage. Now with the Wand and Tome, we talked about swift healing. It costs a lot of resources, so be careful with it. Blessed Barrier is another really useful skill that you should be using in your kit. So Blessed Barrier is going to create a 5-meter area. It's going to increase defense of all party members for 6 seconds. It's also going to increase healing. So this is your oh crap mechanic where you know you're going to need healing of yourself or other people, or you just need damage reduction. You can pair Blessed Barrier with Stalwart Bastion and have 2 ways to lower incoming damage. Again, more of an endgame PvE build, but when you're waiting in queue for dungeons endlessly, throw some of these skills on and tank that dungeon so you can get it completed, because no one wants to play the tank. Moving on to number 3 and one of my favorite, and that's Greatsword and Dagger. So Greatsword and Dagger is like the perfect melee meathead DPS build. Dagger got buffed a lot from the previous versions of the game. So it has passive ways to do crit. The gap closer is awesome. So you're going to have multiple ways to move and get closer to enemies, unlike using different weapon combinations. And it's going to revolve around the same sort of mechanics: gap closing, stunning, and then bursting. Now you have a wide range of options in terms of skill. So when you start out with the Greatsword and Dagger, it's really single target focused, but early on you'll start getting some skills that you can adapt to AoE situations. And that's really what you want to do while you're leveling or power leveling, is just Rambo in, pull everything to you, and boom, AoE cleave it down. So some of the best active skills are Death Blow, Stunning Blow, Inject Venom, and Camouflage Cloak. Some of the best passives are Robust Constitution, Vital Force, Assassin's Instinct, and Wrathful Edge. So kind of how the rotation works for me is usually what I do is I pre-buff with Inject Venom. So that's going to coat my daggers for 9 seconds, and it's going to apply the poison passively when I'm doing attacks. This is also helpful because some of the passives in the skill line will boost your damage to poison targets. So I'll apply this passively, and the gap closer Shadow Strike moves behind the target automatically, so it kind of locks onto them. So it's a little bit better than the gap closer that you have for Greatsword in PvE context. So I'm going to use that, which also binds the target. It's going to put your camera in a goofy position, so you're going to have to rotate it quickly and get used to that. But that's what I'm going to do: pre-buff, gap close, and then I'm going to burst it down. So with Greatsword, what I like to use next is Stunning Blow. That's going to CC the target. A lot of your skills from Greatsword and/or Dagger will boost damage either if the target is stunned or sub 50% health, so you got to be aware of that. Once the target is stunned, then you can make a decision on what skill to use next. As you progress, you're going to have more and more options. So Death Blow you get pretty early on, and it's going to do more damage against stunned targets. And then from this point, you can do AoE damage or single target. One of my favorite is Devastating Tornado. It's just spin to win, doing huge, massive AoE damage in a circle. So I love that ability, but the later skills that you're going to get, like Giga Crash and even Will Breaker, will do some AoE damage with the Greatsword. So depending on what you're doing in content, you'll swap a couple of these skills in or out. Now, Valiant Brawl is a really good single target ability with the Greatsword skill line, so it depends on what you want to use and what the context dictates. This is the issue that you run into with your skill bar, is you almost have to kit yourself with this build for purely single target with like a 1 or 2 AoE skills, or just tons and tons of AoE and mobility. So you might make some changes and save it on a quick slot in your skills for AoE, single target, boss, just mobbing, clearing content, so forth. A couple other things is Brutal Incision is going to be used when the target is sub 50%. This is your built-in execute. You're going to have that. Cleaving Moonlight for Dagger is going to be like your main spammable skill with a low cooldown. And then Vampiric Strike is a really useful skill because it will give you health back. So it allows you to stay aggressive, kind of passively heal yourself a little bit, but still do damage. And then the main survivability mechanism that you're going to be using is Da Vinci's Courage from Greatsword. This is going to increase your health and health regen. It's also going to increase attack speed by 15% for 12 seconds, and applies to all party members within 15 meters, but it has a longer cooldown. So you can use this one of 2 ways. You can use it passively before you jump into combat to make sure that you get the most damage possible because of that attack speed, or you can use it reactively. It's going to boost your health by 1,000 and your health regen, which is nice, plus it's going to make you do more damage. So as you're getting used to things, make sure to save this as an oh crap button along with your Guardian. As you get more and more familiar with it and you're used to the rotation mechanics and survivability, use this offensively. Okay, that is number 3. So let's move on to number 2, Longbow and Wand. This was one of my favorites that I played, and why it's so powerful is both weapons heal, but unlike other weapons, the longbow does really good damage as well. So this is really helpful and kind of at the end game PvE or PvP, strongest possible support build, but it's even really good using it just leveling because you get spells like Nature's Blessing, Swift Healing, Clay's Salvation, and more. Like we've talked about the Wand and Tome a bunch, but you'll have passive healing built into that along with the healing and or regen that comes from the longbow. So the longbow is going to give you healing touch, it's going to give you Nature's Blessing, and Nature's Blessing is also going to increase health regen but also mana regen as well. So that's going to be really nice because it applies to party members. So you're going to have a lot of ways to heal yourself and or party members and buff your entire team. Another really cool useful skill you get a little bit later on is Blitz. It's going to automatically reset the cooldowns for your last skill. So the trick with the longbow is, based on the passives that you use, is hanging out at max distance, which will give you more damage if you have a passive slotted, binding the target with ensnaring arrow because one of the passes will give you more damage while target's bound, and then using skills, and some of them will come off cooldown depending on your rotation, so you can kind of use them back to back. And then once you get Blitz, you can use them back to back and then trigger Blitz and get another nuke. So you're hanging back max range, binding targets, healing yourself, healing others, and then firing off these really impactful skills, and then boom, getting them off cooldown again. It is so fun. The downside of this setup is really that you lack AoE damage. Now you have the AoE damage coming from Wand, which we've talked about. So you're going to apply the curses, whether it's single target and AoE, and then you're going to consume them and explode them. But you're just not going to have nearly as much AoE damage as a staff for a range build and or Greatsword for melee. But you will have incredible survivability, and this is what I use when I was leveling and I was dying or struggling to kill a world boss solo, because I could use this. Now the issue you're going to run into is the max range and or the staying still is just not going to be possible for all content. So make sure to swap those passives out if you're not using it and you're strafing or you're doing the tower and enemies are coming towards you. Passives like Saint's Oath, Vampiric Contract, these are going to be really helpful to passively heal yourself and maintain survivability for you and your group. Moving on to what I think is the #1 build that you should play if you're new to Thrones and Liberty right now, and that's Longbow and Staff. Normally, I don't like range builds, and I play almost always a two-handed Greatsword Nord-looking meatball, because maybe that's the way I am in real life. I don't know, leave me a comment. But this one has it all, basically. It's just going to have mind-numbing damage. We've already talked about it, but Serial Firebombs and Inferno Wave, that's going to be your combo with the Staff, and Ensnaring Arrow and Strafing is going to be a combo with your Longbow. Unlike the Staff and maybe a Dagger or another weapon, the Staff and Longbow combination give you the ability to be survivable, max range, unlike the crossbow, and crazy high damage. You're not going to have the survivability of Longbow and Wand, but you're going to have just as much probably as a Staff and Wand, because you're just going to nuke down content so quickly, it's not going to have a chance to basically fire back at you. And if you have a proper Guardian selected and you're using the right defensive skill, you can be very, very survivable and maintain incredible single target damage. So the most important thing here is to increase your dexterity early on, because dexterity is going to add weapon damage. It's also going to add crit chance, evasion, and attack speed. It is absolutely the best for pure raw damage. And then next is Wisdom. That's going to help with cooldown speed and mana regen, so you can cast abilities more frequently. The general overall combo is going to be Ensnaring Arrow to bind the target in place. This is kind of your main way to lock a target in place, depending on your passives, get more damage. And then you can use Decisive Sniping. So you're going to have to do this pretty quick, because Decisive Sniping has a channel. So the 3-second bind into Decisive Sniping will trigger it right away. Now, Decisive Sniping is also going to increase your critical chance for 3 seconds afterwards. And then Strafing is going to be your main spammable attack into Zephyr's Knock. So lock an enemy down, snipe them to boost your critical, strafing, and then knock. Your AoE combo is basically the simple Serial Firebombs from the Staff into Inferno Wave. And then you can use Chain Lightning. You'll be able to heal yourself with Healing Touch, and you're going to boost your mana regen and your health regen with Nature's Blessing. The passives you're going to want to look at are Steady Aim. This is going to increase your critical chance when targets are bound. Also, Sniper Sense, going to give you more increased critical chance the further you are away. And Rapid Fire Stance, this is a flex one, but it's really important to understand. While you're stationary for 2 seconds, you're going to increase your attack speed. Ideally, you don't want to be moving on this. Now, solo is not always going to be possible, but if you can slot this and do dungeons or anything else, binding a target and sitting in place, it will do a lot more damage for you. Well, gang, those are 5 builds I think you should play and why. Pick them up. I hope this gives you a place to start and know a little bit about the rotations. It will become more simple as you play overall. The biggest thing to understand almost all of these is basically how to resource sustain your mana, not by just spamming abilities that are really high in mana cost, how to survive depending on your specific weapon loadout, and there is a way for each weapon. And then the best weapon combination for you. If you need more survivability, you need more damage, swap these weapons in and out. It's not that punishing. Now, it will be punishing on the weapon mastery and the skill specialization and some of these skill upgrades, but just getting a good weapon combination that works best for you will make the game a lot more fun. Leave me a comment if this helped. Check the links in the description below, and thank you for watching.